everything feels like it's more expensive. Well, everything is more expensive. And it can kind of feel like a bucket that's not getting filled enough all of the way up. And what do you want to do when things start leaking out more and you have to pay out more for stuff? The thing that you think about is retention. And that means, how do I keep more of my top employees, specifically salespeople? How do I keep more of my customers? Because guess what? It costs a lot more to get your customers. So when we think about retention, what does that mean? Well, for most of us, when we want to keep things, we need to put a fence up around them. We need to put them in our savings account. We need to figure out a way to how to keep more of what we have instead of our competitors coming in and eating it all, like the deer have been doing in my garden lately. So how do you keep more of what you have, your top salespeople, your best customers? Well, I kind of think of it as 4 really intensive reasons, things you need to do to keep more of your top employees and customers. And one of them is making sure the right things are getting the water that they need. Here's what I mean. Now, in my garden, I've got to make sure that the right plants are getting the nutrients they need, which is usually, in this times when it's hottest, water. So I have raised beds, which, while it helps things to grow faster, also means that my soil dries out quicker. So when it's 90+ degrees here in Maine, I've got to make sure that the water is going where it needs to and not on the plants that are the weeds that don't need to. So that's number 1 tip, is make sure that you're putting your resources in the places where they actually need to be. For example, if you have salespeople and you're trying to decide who in what role, you kind of have to ask the question, do I have the right people in the right seats on the bus, so to speak? Or is my water being put in the places where it's going to be most likely to grow the things that I want? And that goes for your customers too. Who are the customers that are the best customers for you? And I don't just mean the ones that bring you the most money, but the most profit, the ones that are easiest to work with, and here's my biggie, the ones that refer you to others like them. Okay, so what's the other most important thing that you're going to need to make sure that you keep more of your best customers and employees? Well, in gardening, I look at it as, how am I enriching the soil in which everything is going to grow? And in a business, well, that might be the culture that you're cultivating, which everything's going to grow from. Now, my super secret for such excellent vegetables are these little ladies. Now, you could take that as a metaphor for maybe get some more women on your sales team and sales leadership. And there's a ton of data and research why, but we'll leave that for a different post. But it's also because these little ladies, well, see that one laid an egg where she wasn't supposed to. But these little ladies also eat all of my organic compost, which turns into direct fertilizer that I can put into my garden beds. So not only do they do things like eat all of the ticks off of the ground and the grasshoppers and the bad things, but they also help provide me with fresh eggs every day and also enriches my soil. So what does this mean in your business? Now, that's a question that I had to give a lot of thought to. How do we get our employees to stay? And we're in the middle of the great resignation still, where people are leaving their jobs at a record rate. So this was a study that was done by Deloitte a few years ago, where they found that the majority of millennials are leaving their jobs every 2 years. But the ones that were more likely to stay are the ones that had a mentor to be able to help them. It's almost as if you plan on them leaving and help them to do so is the very thing that causes them to stay longer. Now, what about your customers? What do you need to be able to train your salespeople to do? And what do you need to do for those renewals to happen? Well, there was a study that was done by B2B Decision Labs. And in that study, a behavioral study, they found that the preference stability that we feel that we need to disrupt in our initial sales process isn't the same way that we get our customers to stay. Now, for example, I mentioned the deer stink that we had earlier. And by making this homemade recipe, I was able to, for this entire summer, keep the deer from eating my hostas. Now, here what you don't know is that I have been spraying the deer stink on these since the very early spring, and so these hostas have been growing with it all year or all summer long, despite all of the rains that we've had, to the point that the status quo has become for the deers that the hostas don't taste good. Well, this is actually how it works for your customers as well. When you in sales keep a constant check-in with them and not just when they're renewing,
and ask them about why they decided to buy in the first place and the process that they had to go through and what other options are out there that are really different now and what are the goals that they're trying to reach now. That's actually you reinforcing that status quo and preference, which is you. So take these tips to work on your culture, to have the right people on the bus, to train your team in account managers to understand what the preference, stability, and status quo for your customers are and reinforce that. And the more training and development you do, the more likely you are to keep them. This is how you and your team will be able to not just survive these economic downtimes, but to thrive in them. So tell me what worked for you. Tell me what tips that you have for retaining and keeping your best customers, employees. And until next time, keep learning and keep sharing out there.